Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the IMA Weekly Show. I'm Dr. Josef Varon. I'm the President and Chief Medical Officer of the Independent Medical Alliance. Tonight we have a special show. As you know, millions of people struggle with anxiety and many more struggle with insomnia. So sometimes, in order to treat both, a lot of clinicians prescribe benzodiazepines. I mean, they seem like something that you're going to take, takes care of the anxiety, puts you to sleep. They work quickly, you feel better, and it makes you much easier to fall asleep. But what happens when this occasional use becomes a nightly use? I mean, when people start taking these medications on regular basis, and then if the patients decide that maybe I should try to stop it, and sometimes it's not as easy to stop them as we think. So, when it comes to insomnia, we really need to identify why are people having insomnia? What's going on? I mean, can we do something just to improve sleep? Or when we give these medications, are we just sedating the patients to fall asleep? I mean, we know of even important people that, have required a variety of sedatives just to be put to sleep. So these are things that are extremely important. And today, we are taking a closer look to benzodiazepines, what they are, whether they help or they don't help. And once you are on them, how do you come off them? So for that, I ask today Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring. He's an IMA Senior Fellow in Psychiatry. He's a former FDA Medical Officer, and he's the CEO and Medical Director of TaperClinic. He is a good friend. I've referred him a lot of patients to him because his work focuses exclusively on psychiatric medication withdrawal and the prescribing. And he has seen this for a long time. So with that, let me welcome to Joseph. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey Joe, really happy to be here with you.
So, Joseph, let's start with the basics. I mean, I think that many of our followers they've heard the word benzodiazepines. Many of them know what anxiety is. Many of them have probably suffered from anxiety, and especially the last few years, we all have suffered from anxiety. And I mean, some of them have issues with sleep. But I want us to tonight to talk about whether these agents are effective and things like that. So let's start with the basics.
Mhm.
What are benzodiazepines? How do they work? And can you give us some common names of these agents so that our viewers who are not medically oriented know what we're talking about?
Yes, yeah. Benzodiazepines are drugs that act on the GABA system. This is a neurotransmitter system in the brain, responsible really for like slowing things down. And so that's why we see them being effective for anxiety, for sleep, even for things like muscle spasms, and then also seizures. So they act on the GABA A subunit, and um, so the most common benzos right now are Xanax or alprazolam, Klonopin or clonazepam, and then Valium, which is diazepam. And there's also Ativan, and there's also temazepam. And then there's a closely related class called Z drugs, and that includes drugs like Ambien and Sonata, which for all intents and purposes, they're essentially benzodiazepines. You don't need to think about them any differently, but typically they act shorter.
Okay. Now, these are, I mean, most of our viewers probably have heard some of these
Mhm.
words. There are even some street names for some of them. For example, Xanax, they call them handlebars, if I remember correctly. I mean, that's what
Yeah,
some of,
bars. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, I mean, there
Yeah.
are so many folkloric names for some of these agents. And unfortunately, we have seen many patients come with overdoses arriving to the emergency departments on these agents. But one of the reasons why they are so popular is because these medications seem to work remarkably well at the very beginning. When you first, where you're, I'm going to call it a virgin on these agents, and you take your first benzodiazepine, especially somebody that's dealing with severe anxiety or inability to sleep, they work quite well. Why is that?
They're one of the like short term, they're one of the most effective psychiatric medications. I mean, it's almost like, you know, putting down three drinks or three shots. Like, I mean, within the space of about 30 to 40 minutes, people feel remarkably calmer. And doesn't matter where the anxiety or the insomnia is coming from poor health, physical problems, stressful life events. It could be any of those things, and kind of like a blanket, it's able to suppress the anxiety, and that's therein lies the reason why it's so addictive, and it becomes so dangerous over time because I mean, it essentially puts you into a very calm and relaxed state. And if you've been suffering from insomnia for months, or have been wound up so tight that you're just restless and you haven't been able to relax even for a second, like that feeling, it's almost like bliss to be able to have a full night of sleep or to be finally at peace and out of your mind. But the problem with them is, it's a non-specific fix. It doesn't fix any underlying cause, and our bodies hate it. That like most psychiatric medications, um, and neurotransmitter systems, the GABA system is involved in all of our physiology. So if you're constantly sort of drugging your system and slowing it down, eventually you produce you down regulate the receptors to restore the balance, and the drug wears off. Well, the therapeutic effect wears off, and then you're essentially stuck on a drug, and you're between a rock and a hard place because if you ever want to come off, now you're dealing with withdrawal plus the original problem that got you on the drug in the first place.
So, I mean, I'm sure that many of our viewers are now saying, well, I took let's say, a clonazepam, or I took a Xanax 3 weeks ago because I was having insomnia. Does that mean that they are going to become dependent to the point that, they need to do this? I mean, how does somebody go from taking a benzodiazepine from time to time to reaching a point in which they cannot imagine functioning or sleeping without it?
It happens surprisingly quickly. So I would say within a month, within a month of ongoing use, you can develop a physiologic dependence to it. That means expose the brain to it for a month, the brain already starts to downregulate the receptors, and you will experience some withdrawal coming off. Now, mind you, coming off after a month of use, it's not pretty, but it's still a lot easier than coming off after being on it for 1 to 2 years. After you've been on it for 1 to 2 years and maybe on pretty high doses, that's a heck of a lot more neurological adaptation to the drug than just the slight amount of tolerance that you've built up over a month. So, but yeah, Joe, it can happen pretty quickly.
Now, I have two questions for you, and one is mostly an educational question. What's the difference between addiction, tolerance, and physical dependence? And the second question is, can a patient become physically dependent when they are taking a medication just as prescribed by their doctors? I mean, their doctors tell them, take this dose and don't go up, just stay right there.
It's really it's pretty semantic, but I'll talk about what this debate is like amongst medical professionals. So for a long time, when people were saying, oh, these psychiatric meds, they're so addictive, doctors were saying, there's no evidence they're addictive. And then we had to ask them, well, what do you mean there's no evidence they're addicted? People are clearly becoming physiologically dependent on it. And they'd say, well, that's not the same as addiction. So if you want to be really like picky with your language, doctors seem to want to use the word addiction when there's drug-seeking behavior, when people are like stealing jewelry from their parents and, their friends, and, they're taking higher amounts of it. So whenever you get that sort of drug-seeking behavior and that criminal activity associated with the drug, they say, oh, it's addiction. And then they like to distinguish that from physiologic dependence. So physiological dependence happens with any psychiatric drug, SSRIs, benzodiazepines. That's just the process of your body getting used to the drug over time, and then having a withdrawal.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And you know and thank you for clarifying that for us. So now let's focus a little bit on sleep. I mean, and there is a really significant difference between being sedated, because that's what a lot of people, they just want to go to bed and get sedated and fall asleep, and
Yeah.
getting healthy, getting a sleep that is restorative. I mean, most of us know that, there are nights that, yes, you have slept, but then the next day you feel like hell. You don't feel you don't feel fresh, you don't feel like that. And unfortunately, some of these medications don't give you that restorative sleep that we need. Uh, I know that a lot of people think that because Xanax or alprazolam, it has a shorter duration of action, then they try to go for things like clonazepam that is a little longer acting. And if you'd use an agent such as clonazepam because it's a longer acting, do you have more of an addiction concern, or less of an addiction concern as compared to Xanax, for example?
I think it really is about the same. I mean, theoretically, you could say, well, if you're taking a shorter acting drug, there's less of that drug in your system in a 24-hour period, and maybe there's less adaptation to the drug, and you'll become tolerant to it slower. That makes sense to me, but in practice, I see no difference between it, whether someone's on Xanax, Klonopin, or Ambien. I've seen people become physiologically dependent and hooked on even short-acting sedatives.
Okay, so now let's go back to to the sleep pattern,
Yeah.
and so that our viewers understand. Normally during the night you have in periods of rapid eye movement sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep. You have deep sleep, and a careful balance of these different areas gives you that nice restorative sleep that makes you you know, be fresh the next day. Also, there are a lot of things that happen during sleep. You start producing hormones, you produce growth hormone, your sugar gets controlled. I mean, there are many good things. What happens when you take a benzodiazepine? What happens to the sleep architecture of somebody?
So what we know from polysomnography studies is that it disrupts the sleep architecture. You're not getting the restorative stages of sleep, and those are essentially deep sleep and REM. And so while you may be unconscious, it's not the restorative type of sleep because our neurophysiology is complicated. What happens in the brain when we go to sleep, and if we start introducing drugs into the mix, it throws that off. And so, what we do find is that the sleep is less restorative. You have more lighter sleep, and it's just not the same as getting healthy natural sleep.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, if somebody's taking any of these medications, is there any role on cycling them? Just, let's say they take Xanax and then they move to clonazepam, and then does that make any difference? Or because I know people that have done that, at least some of my patients have.
Yeah, I mean it is. I mean it is one strategy if you're going to just depend on pharmacology, but I would say the more effective way to do it would be to cycle outside of the drug class, and so it would be to use trazodone, and then maybe swap to a mirtazapine, and then swap to doxepin, and then go to
Mm.
maybe a benzo for a couple times. And so because if you just swap within the class, it's the same physiologic force that's going to be building, which is essentially the facilitating the GABA system. And so I would swap outside of the drug class.
How does tolerance change the picture? I mean, you were telling us that some people become tolerant to this, but how does it change the picture? Is there anything that the people can do to avoid being tolerant to these agents, or just not take them altogether?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that therein lies the problem. There are some people out there who they never become fully tolerant to the drug, and that's why you hear these stories where people are like, I've been taking it for years and I'm fine. And then there's another group of people who said, this was great. It worked really well for 6 months, and then I needed a higher dose. And then a couple of years later, they're completely maxed out and it's doing nothing. And then there's another group of people, and the drug just seems to make them worse. It makes them more depressed, more anxious, more obsessive, more agoraphobic. Because we don't do long-term studies on these benzos. I mean, I think that the Xanax trials were 8 weeks in duration. We have no idea how to predict whether you're going to be someone who fully adapts to the drug. And so it's like Russian roulette, honestly, Joe. It's like that there's no predictive risk factors where you could say this person's going to become tolerant and this other person won't. And so you don't know how sustainable of a treatment it's going to be for you at the outset.
I think that that's important to discuss because, we are all about patient safety. I
Mhm.
mean, yes, we heard that, physical dependence can develop even if you take the medications exactly as your doctor tells you. And, if you stop them, what can get you as far as trouble. But we also need what happens when benzodiazepines combined with common things that people do, like alcohol, narcotics, or other sedating agents. I see patients that combine things, they take their benzodiazepine and their glass of wine before they go to bed. And sometimes that's the only thing that puts them to sleep. You've seen that in your practice, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean we've all been seeing it on TV lately. I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. Benzos they've been killing. The celebrities have been dropping dead from benzos. I mean, if I just think about the news recently, we had the Nashville actress Hayden Panettiere, who was
Mhm.
found with a whole bunch of drugs and had what looks like an accidental overdose recently. She had a history of addiction, alcohol, opiate use. Heath Ledger was found dead on three different benzos and two different opiates. It's like, who is prescribing this stuff? And then finally, we had Matthew Perry die recently.
Mhm.
He was getting prescribed like 50 vials of ketamine at a time, and he also had two benzos in his system when he was found down in his pool. These are incredibly dangerous drugs to mix, and that's why they have this boxed warning. Like it's the highest warning that there is that if you mix them with drugs like opiates, you die when you sleep. You go into respiratory depression, you stop breathing, and you essentially just die in your sleep. So they're very dangerous, especially in addicts. Because if an addict has a really hard day or they're in a lot of pain, they may impulsively take more of their medication, and not wanting to end their life, and it happens. It's really, really tragic.
So we tell our patients, well, maybe you should calm down on your benzos or slowly. You have your way to do things, and which is very successful, by the way. But one of the problems that I see from my patients is they say that they get rebound insomnia, especially when you tell them to cut down or even stopping the benzodiazepine, and then they have not only they cannot sleep, now they have intense anxiety, and then I don't know what is the original problem, or is this a withdrawal, or is it a rebound symptom? I don't know what to do with these patients. Is this common?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean that's why relying on benzodiazepines long term, it's like doing a deal with the devil, right? It's like because if you rely on them long term, when you eventually want to come off, you have to one, you have to be able to withstand the withdrawal. Now you can mitigate that by doing a slow taper, but there's still going to be some withdrawal there. I mean, that's just the nature of coming off the drug. Your brain needs to regrow receptors, and the way it does that is by you being in withdrawal. And it's like, okay, I'm in a state of excitation now because the drug is coming out. I'm more anxious. I have insomnia. I'm going to regrow those circuits. I'm going to, make those receptors stronger again. And and if you haven't figured out why you actually had the insomnia in the first place, that's just like a double whammy. You're going to be stuck on it forever because I mean it's crippling to deal with your original insomnia and then also have the withdrawal effects on top of it. And that's why people get stuck on them. And that's why, 9% of the US population is currently taking benzodiazepines.
But I want to be very uh, careful, and I want to make sure that our viewers understand this clearly. Why should we never tell a long-term benzodiazepine user to stop the medication abruptly? And what happens if they stop too quickly? And
So
again, this is what you do for a living.
yeah, yeah. So there's a few things to keep in mind. The first one is if they do it like cold turkey, they can die. Yeah, so just like with alcohol, so alcohol and benzos are the only drugs that you can die if you stop them cold turkey because you can have seizures because they are the gas pedal, and if you pull it off rapidly, you throw the brain into a state of excitation. You can have a seizure. The seizure affects the brainstem. You go into cardiorespiratory arrest, and your heart stops. And so that's how people die coming off. But most people aren't cold turkeying off of them. They're coming off in 2 months or so, which is still like really fast if you've been on them for several years. Now, for a long time, this was not recognized, and it was only in 2019 when the FDA updated the labels, but they started warning physicians about a condition called protracted benzodiazepine withdrawal. And this was integrated into the 2025 American Society of Addiction Medicine guidelines. But you can essentially develop a brain injury if you come off these medications too quickly. This doesn't happen in everyone. This is a minority of people, but it's large enough that and it's a serious enough risk that it dictates how everyone should taper. Like let's say this I think they've estimated it around 10 to 15% of people this can happen to. So that's sizable, right? You want to avoid that. So there's something about coming off the drugs in a way that's really quickly throwing the brain into a state of withdrawal where people are just essentially hanging on for dear life, just white knuckling it, and they think, I'm just going to hang on long enough and it's going to go away. It doesn't happen for some of these people. They wait 1 month, it doesn't get any better. They wait 2 months, it's not any better. By the third month, they feel even worse. They then try and go back on the drug, expecting that it's going to make things go away. They say, I'm in withdrawal, but I just give up. I don't want to do this anymore. But the withdrawal symptoms don't go away because at that point they're not actually in withdrawal anymore. They've had a neurological injury. There's something about that excitatory storm in the brain if you come off the drugs too quickly that can be harmful. And this is the Jordan Peterson story. I mean, if like this isn't random stuff happening to, people that we're not, aware of. Like this is happening to real people. Like it's taking out celebrities. I mean, it is that common. And so the way you get off these medications safely is you want to match the rate of reduction to the withdrawal symptoms. You always want to have mild to moderate withdrawal. You never want them to get in the way of you being able to work, look after your family, do your normal activities of daily living. And so you find a rate, and generally what we do in our practice is you start at 5%. If they tolerate that reduction well, you increase it a little bit, and you kind of just keep on creeping it up until the person says, okay, I'm good. That's about the speed I can tolerate while still being functional. As long as you continue to adjust and you follow that rate, they can come off without exposing themselves to that risk of having that severe withdrawal, which can really be harmful. And so that's why it's important to go slow. You minimize the risk that they're going to have one of these protracted withdrawal injuries because once that happens, it can take 2 years to go away. Like it's like having a TBI, and it can be very disabling.
One area that I thought we should touch upon, and that's a particular age group which we need to discuss, and that's the elderly. I mean, I frequently see my elderly patients on benzodiazepines. Of course, I'm very concerned that they will fall, that, they'll have issues with cognition, imagine them driving or things like that. But a lot of doctors like to use benzodiazepines for the elderly patients because, quote, they appear to be very effective. What are your thoughts about benzos and the elderly?
I think I think elderly people, especially medically complicated elderly people who are in nursing homes, they have so many things that are causing arousal. Whether it's their physical health problems, whether it's the medications they're on, whether it's the fact that they can't move, whether it's the fact that they're left inside and they don't go in the sun, and the food quality is poor. There's social isolation. And so benzodiazepines just end up being a panacea. It's like, the doctor can come in and just say, "Hey, I've got this drug," and that's why this was a huge. I mean, Joe, you're probably all over this. I know this back in the 2000s. This was a big deal. I mean, there were congressional investigations into what was happening in nursing homes. It wasn't particularly around benzos. It was around antipsychotics, because we were essentially snowing the elderly with antipsychotics. We were using more antipsychotics for people in nursing homes than people with schizophrenia. And so it's just a very vulnerable population where, the doctors, they don't have that much time with them. They might go out there once a week and they just default to using sedatives to just kind of paper over whatever is making that person aroused and uncomfortable.
Mhm. I mean, that's I mean, I remember those days and there was so much going on. So, I mean, so basically what you're telling me is benzos are bad. If you're on a benzo, try to cut down with supervision, and and obviously try not to mix it with anything else because things can happen. So the biggest question that comes to mind is, so okay, benzos are not good. So what do we do instead? I mean, people, like you said, sedating them is not the way to go. But people come to me every day, and every day they say, I cannot sleep, doctor. I
Yeah.
cannot sleep. So before prescribing any other sedative medication, what do you think a healthcare professional should be looking for a patient that says, "Hey, I cannot sleep"?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's very hard, and it's difficult work to do. So right now we're in a paradigm, whether it's with major depressive disorder or insomnia, where in the DSM it's just like, oh, you have insomnia disorder, as if it explains something, or you have major depressive disorder, and implicit with all of that is, oh, it's just this genetic thing that you have, and now we have to manage it. It's not true. The way insomnia is the same as anxiety, it's the same as depression. The symptoms mean something, and the best framework to look at insomnia is that it's a problem with arousal. And so what are the things that are causing arousal in the body? And we can go through a number of them. Because there's like a million things, right? You listen to Huberman, and Andrew Huberman's like, wear blue light blocking glasses, get morning sun, do some grounding, do meditation. And it's like where do you even start? With so many gurus out there and different people saying do this and that. I mean, I've had insomnia at different times, and this is crazy. When I was at my most desperate, I actually bought, this is an EMF this is an EMF blocking beanie, so I can relate to people who have insomnia. I mean, you can do some crazy things. You're just like, I want everything, but insomnia is really near and dear to my heart because it's something that I've recovered from, and I help a lot of patients with this. So let's do it like a tier list, Joe. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos where it's like S tier at the top, and then it's like F here with S being like right at the top. This is how I would look at it. So arousal, we can look at arousal from physical health problems, and we can look at arousal from psychological, because it's really those two pieces. Let's start with the physical health. Weight loss. Okay, so here's one of the big things. 70% of our population are overweight, 30% of them are obese. Now, so when you are carrying around extra weight, it is metabolically active. You are in a higher inflammatory state, you're in a higher state of arousal. That is going to tilt you into a state of lighter sleep and less sleep. On top of that, it's a cause of obstructive sleep apnea. Now, most people think that the weight problem, like that's where that's if they have obstructive sleep apnea and you give them a CPAP, they should be fine. That's not the case. 50% of people with obstructive sleep apnea, you put them on the CPAP, they still complain of sleep problems. They're still not having restful sleep. And so there's more going on there. And what it comes down to is just when you are heavier, you're carrying around more inflammation, your heart is pumping more to oxygenate your tissues. So one of the best things that you can help your patients do is help them lose weight. And
Okay.
so that's really, really challenging. But weight loss is super important. Now, the other things that are very important is also, and these go hand in hand with weight loss. It's like this is the three things you're about to hear. This is all S tier. Whole foods. Get people eating clean, whole foods, not eating, ultra processed foods, which can be inflammatory. They can disrupt the gut. That's just another pressure that leads to high arousal. It also, when people eat whole foods, they eat less. They're less likely to overeat and cause problems. And then we also want people to be moving every day. We need 10,000, we need 7 to 10,000 steps. That's the sweet spot for the benefits with sleep. And there's, all the other benefits, weight loss, better cardiovascular health, better blood sugar control. So, right, like if someone comes to me and they're just like, they want the blue light blocking glasses, and I'm just like, and they're overweight, it's like, we got to talk about the things that really work. We've got to get you moving. We've got to help you bring your weight down, and start eating better. Not only will it improve your insomnia, it will improve anxiety, it will improve depression, it'll improve your cardio, your cardiovascular and your metabolic health. It's like it's that thing that just like this is the thing, when people do this, it's like everything improves. And so that's like if you have patients, I want you to just hammer that note all the time to get them to become physically healthier. Now, so that's over here on S tier physical health wise, right? Now let's shift over and talk about the psychological parts. Now, we we live lives of chronic stress, and talking to you, Joe, right now, um, especially like physicians and lawyers and other just even moms, and anyone people who are just like busy and just on all the time. Um, we live lives where we wake up in the morning and we rush, we get our kids ready for school, we quickly eat something, we run to the office, and then we do our grocery shopping, and then we work on our side hustle in the evening, or you're running like IMA or some other medical organization. If you are constantly in this state of just go, 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 go mentally, you will wire your brain into a state of hyper arousal. And so this is where we need to start consciously trying to bring in some breaks. So, some people will do things like breath work, some people like meditation. Sometimes it's just scheduling some downtime, um, going outside, being in nature, like just shifting out of this state of constantly being on can be very, very helpful. You want to help people address their stresses. It's very hard to get into a low arousal state if you're having relationship problems, if you're having problems in your career and you're unhappy there. So you may need to work with some professionals to really solve just legitimate problems in your life to bring that down. Now, the last thing that I'm going to put up here at like S tier, which is really important, is the drugs that are going into your body. And so we're specifically looking at the overuse of caffeine, the overuse of nicotine, and other drugs like stimulants. ADHD medications as well can be a big problem. If you're also taking a bunch of stimulants all the time, you're on just like a roller coaster of these drugs going in and out of your system. You go into withdrawal overnight. That disrupts your sleep. Um, but you also wire your brain into a state of hyperarousal. So if we're going to think about, top three things, it's get healthy, get physically healthy, good food, move your body, cut out the drugs and alcohol, and then w work on whatever is stressing you out in your life. Those are really the S tier things, that do all of that stuff before tinkering with like the blue light blocking glasses and all of that. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's fascinating because what you're saying is that our autonomic nervous system continues to go in override. I mean, it's constantly going. So a question for you is, what are your thoughts about vagal nerve stimulation as an inducer for sleep? And also the second one has to do with near infrared light. And I'm going to tell you why, because the hyper Joseph, I have used them both. And
Yeah.
both of them, at least in my case, have worked like a charm. I use a pulsetto device for the neck, and
Mhm.
trust me, I mean, I fall asleep like a baby 20 minutes later, or I go in near infrared light for 20 minutes and I fall asleep on that thing.
Yeah, yeah. So physiologically, it makes a lot of sense that the pulsetto can put you into a state of calm. Um, and and so I mean that makes sense. When it comes to the near infrared light, I mean, you correct me on this, Joe, because my understanding is that this is a mitochondrial intervention. It kind of makes the mitochondria more efficient. And that makes sense. Like if you are um, if your mitochondria is stressed because you're overtaxing your body, there's some physical health issues. If you do the infrared light, that will make it more efficient and you'll be calmer. So if that's what's going on, I understand it, but I'm always going to be partial to the root cause, right? It's like, why are the mitochondria sick? Why is that vagus nerve like have low tone and we need to kind of, outwardly kind of stimulate it. So that's why I wouldn't put them up at the S tier. I might kind of put them down here at like the A or the B tier, because they're not harmful and they don't have withdrawal or anything like that. But for something to be up here at the S tier, it's got to be hitting the underlying cause.
Well, no sleep discussion can finish without us talking about a couple of other things. A lot of people in the last few years have turned to cannabis or other THC-like products to help them sleep. What do we actually know about these products as far as the sleep architecture? And what are your thoughts about it? I know a lot of people that, take some cannabis either as gummies or, and, you find them all over the internet to fall asleep. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly dangerous, especially for young people, because I mean we're essentially just when we're using cannabis, we're just using it to mask the problem essentially, and so um, you know, insomnia is a symptom that we want to lean into and we want to understand. And there's an opportunity cost to masking it. I mean, if it signals like, hey, you're overdoing it in your life, or we've got some physical health problems that we really need to address. If you don't address them, it's going to fester beneath the surface, and then it's going to pop up later on with a problem. And so I don't like it because it doesn't hit the root cause. The other issue is unless you're really picky about like the cannabis that you're going to be using, like the stuff is way too strong now. Like it's insanely strong. Like from the 2010s onwards, it's like tripled in potency. Back in the 70s, it was 3 to 5%. You go into a dispensary now, it's 25 to 35%. It's much more likely to cause psychiatric problems, to trigger things like mania. I don't know if people here remember the Amanda Bynes, the Nickelodeon star. Like
Mhm.
she did like She's the Man and all of that. Like she's like Britney. She ended up on a conservatorship. That's the story of cannabis. She was on overusing Adderall and cannabis. It triggered a psychosis. She essentially torched her career online, and she was using high potency cannabis. And it's just happening more and more and more lately. So I'm incredibly worried about our country. I know there's all of this legalization in the different states happening. It's creating this feeling like it's much safer than it is. And I think and that's why you get people talking about being California sober. Have you heard that, Joe? California, yeah, yeah, isn't it? It's crazy. It's like I'm California sober. I'm not drinking. I'm not doing any meth or cocaine. I'm just on cannabis. It's natural and it's safe. Like it's fine. It really isn't. It's not good for your mental health. It's associated with high risk of suicide, high risk of depression. And I don't think it's a great way to deal with. I don't think it's a good way to deal with any mental health problems, to be honest.
It makes perfect sense. Now, clearly, those of us who are hyper and have to be working will continue to do this. Can you give us some final thoughts as to good sleep hygiene methods? I remember you and me, we went on a walk and you
Yeah.
gave me a list about a big of things that I needed to do in my bed so I can fall asleep. I've done about 50% of them and I'm sleeping much better.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So some were cold, somewhere quiet. Cold is, 68 degrees to 70 degrees, wherever you're comfortable, I think is really good. Quiet, dark, and um, yeah, I mean, some of the other things, like morning light is really good as well. That's good for anchoring your circadian rhythm. Something else that I want people to try, and this is interesting, it's time spent outside in the sun. If you like right now, it might be kind of warm for some of you guys, but soon the temperature's going to come down. If you're on a laptop, bring it outside. The more time you spend outside in the sun looking at bright daylight, it's calming, it's grounding, it helps people sleep. So we there's I don't know if you guys have been following the news lately, but the USS Lincoln. So this is that boat that's out in Iran right now, and it just broke records. It hasn't been to a port in 250 days, and the sleep conditions there are just terrible. I did some research on U.S. Navy men. They sleep 5 hours and 15 minutes on average. That is terrible, and it's because it's so loud there. But there's all these other things going on. It's loud. They don't like many of them. They don't move when they're there. They don't get any more than about 4,000 steps a day. They just sit in chairs for these long shifts, monitoring instruments. They don't see the sun. They're kind of in these little boxes, and so like we evolved to be in sunlight. We evolved to be outside and in nature. And I think the more we can kind of bring more of that into our life, outside when the sun is up, see the sun throughout the day, go for a walk outside. Don't just kind of, if you have control over it, don't just have these crazy schedules where you're working at night or you're just underneath fluorescent lights all the time. Because, as we can see with the Navy, with the soldiers on the USS Lincoln, they're losing their minds. Multiple of them are trying to jump overboard right now. It's and so that I mean that's the impact of essentially working 250 days in this terrible environment with poor sleep and no rest. And so I mean that's what they're missing. So I think just being living with nature a little bit more, not kind of getting off that. But here's the big thing, and I'm going to be a little bit repetitive here, and I think it's important that I repeat myself. As someone who had really bad insomnia for a long time, for a long time, I focused on all of the hacks. I was just like, I'm going to wear the blue light glasses. My room's going to be the perfect temperature. I have the stupid hat. I've got that 8 sleep. I think I spent like 5 grand on the bed that cools down. Nothing works as well as losing 25 pounds and walking 10,000 steps a day. And so you can try and hack your way out of it, but the best thing that you can do for yourself and for your patients is just get them physically healthy again, get them outside, get them moving. You'd be surprised at how the sleep improves, back pain improves, your liver function, like just everything. And so let's just do first things first. Like let's just stay with the S tier and then go and do all those other things. The other things they certainly help, but like just the physical health is really the most important thing.
And one thing that I want to make very clear to our viewers, I mean, you are not telling us today that benzodiazepines are the worst drugs and that nobody should ever use them, because I have seen you in some of the other,
Mhm.
lectures that you have given, and you do believe that there is a role for these agents in some selected specific circumstances. It's just not for everybody, and people
Yeah,
need to do common things.
for absolutely, yeah. It's really easy to demonize the drugs, and I don't want to do that. I want to demonize the system that we're in right now because I mean, these are just tools that we have in our tool belt. I mean, benzos can be great if you're traveling overseas and you're dealing with jet lag and you just need to sleep. They're great when you have a panic attack. They're great, in an acute emergency. And they could be great for someone who you try all of the non-drug therapies and it just doesn't work and they just need something. And you give them informed consent and it works long term. There's no shame in that. The issue is that we have a very transactional medical system where we don't really, you know, to make ends meet, we're seeing so many patients, and if you have 2,000 patients, how are you going to understand their lives? If you're a family medicine doctor, how can you like think about how like most people like don't even know how like it was so hard for me to learn how to lose weight And I'm like really motivated. Like, could you imagine, working with your patients and it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do a food diary. I'm going to teach you how to start moving again. It's like these are incredibly difficult things to do, and we don't have time in our system. So instead of helping them do these things and live healthier lives, we just default to using medications that sadly make a lot of people worse in the long run.
That's excellent, Joseph. This is amazing. You actually have caused some commotion. I'm looking at the chat, how everybody's writing of what they do, what they don't use, and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
let's bring in Autumn so that she can help us get
sure.
some questions from some of these individuals.
Yes. Hi, guys. We have lots of questions, so I'll try to go through them quickly. Bob Isaacson asked, question, do you have any advice for benzodiazepine users who continue to suffer from long-term cognitive impairment following addiction recovery? Are these cognitive impairments reversible or are they permanent?
From what I've seen in my practice, a lot of them are reversible. Most people, when they get off the medications, and if you just support their general health, they get better over time. Now, in general, people who I've seen who have had neurological damage from these drugs, the recovery seems to take place over about 2 years. But there are some people where it lasts longer. But in general, the brain tends to be very neuroplastic for psychiatric drug injuries, and people tend to notice a gradual improvement over time.
An anonymous attendee asked, do benzos and alcohol have the same effect on the brain? I've heard that benzos are used to treat alcohol use disorder.
Yeah, yeah. So in general, yes, they both act on the GABA system. I think alcohol has much broader effects. I haven't studied it in that many details. I think alcohol is a lot more active at other receptor sites, but yes, it does have a big GABA effect as well, and that's why we use benzos to help with withdrawal. But it's not like a one for one. Alcohol is pretty different from benzos in terms of the pharmacologic effects.
Okay. Ryan C. asked, what about Lunesta? I don't know if that's a supplement or a drug. He also said, I was a 4 to 5 hour per night sleeper most of my life. An attending physician noted, you never sleep, do you? I have used a sleep aid for years now. When I don't take it, I only sleep 4 hours. That's my baseline. Otherwise, I would not sleep. Are there some of us who are simply genetically programmed to sleep less?
Oh yeah, yeah. And so I mean, so Lunesta is essentially like a benzo. It's part of the Z drug class. And so, if I had a patient like that, I would say, again, the S tier things. Let's look at your diet. Let's look at your physical health. Are you moving? Are you getting out in the sun? And if you're doing all of those things and you have really good health and you're still having a really difficult time sleeping, and no one has been able to find um, something that could potentially be causing that high arousal state. That's what psychiatric medications I think should be used for. It's when the non-drug approaches aren't working, and yeah.
Another question from Bob Isaacson. He asked, is trazodone a safe alternative to use as a sleeping aid? Are there any known long-term side effects from its use?
Trazodone, I think, is much safer than benzos. The main side effect with trazodone is it's like a rare one that rarely happens. It's priapism. It's like a sustained erection, which is actually a medical emergency. You have to go to the emergency room because otherwise there can be vascular problems.
Mhm.
But that's very rare. And honestly, as someone who runs a practice getting people off medications, I haven't had a single person come to me saying, help me get off this trazodone. And so it doesn't seem to be causing problems. And I've been doing this for 7 years. And so I've seen hundreds of people. So I think it's much safer than being on a benzo.
Now, one thing that I wanted to add just on the previous question that they had asked us, and as a person that sleeps 3 to 4 hours a day, there
Mhm.
is actually indeed there is a genetic clue. There is something that's called the DIC2 gene, which it does happen. It actually runs in families, and it actually allows people to sleep a little. I keep on thinking that I have it. I've never been tested for it, but so that people know, yes, some people can sleep less. You don't have to have the 8 hours of sleep. Just a few, but I just wanted to make sure that we're clear and transparent.
I mean,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, totally. There are some people who are light sleepers, but um, I would say before, you default to like, hey, that's just me. Try the other stuff first because I told myself for years, I'm just like, I just run hot, I'm just someone that sleeps, 5 to 6 hours a night. And then I made some changes and I was like, oh, I guess I could squeak out another hour if I need to. So I still sit around like 6.5 to 7, but it's a lot nicer than 4 to 5, I have to say.
We've gotten a lot of questions on the use of like melatonin. This anonymous attendee asked, do you promote sleeping agents such as melatonin, tryptophan, and GABA? Do those produce dependence? And then we also were getting questions on nightly CBD use without THC.
Yeah. Without knowing more details about the person, it's all a hack, guys.
Yeah.
That's the way I would look at it. It's all of the melatonin and these different things. Yeah, they're safer, but you want no, it's not a melatonin deficiency or a CBD deficiency or anything like that. I really want to encourage people to look at their insomnia as like it's telling us something. It's like our brains are these remarkable feedback organisms. They're like when you're unhappy, when you're anxious, when you're restless, when you're depressed, it's saying something is out of balance. And so I really want you to lean into that and become curious about, what is happening with my physical health or in my emotional life that's tilting me towards this state of hyperarousal. And if you're able to, and guys, usually if we're in the US, it's usually the food, it's usually the weight, and it's usually the lack of movement, and then also the fact that we spend all our time inside with like fluorescent lights instead of like being outside. And so
Being
play around.
stimulated.
Yeah, play around with those things.
Yeah,
I
being
do have a
stimulated, scrolling on our phones and taking in all kinds of news all throughout the evening.
I do have a
Yeah.
question for you,
Yeah.
Joseph, and I know that this is a different one, but I always carry or fly with me with these two, magnesium glycinate and
Yeah.
GABA.
Oh yeah.
Uh, your opinion on this? These are supposed to be good for sleep, and they're
Yeah.
non-addictive.
Yeah. I tell you what, much safer than being on benzos. And I take them too, guys. I've got some Xanax myself, and occasionally I take it. I also have a closet full of I'm hating on them here, but if you look in my closet, yeah, I've got some glycine, which I like to take. I think glycine is pretty good for sleep. Magnesium doesn't work for me, but I think as one-offs when you're traveling, when you need something in a pinch, I think it's all okay, but it's not the ultimate solution.
And not the answer for
Yeah.
long-term use.
Yeah.
We had a couple questions that I'll just kind of combine. If you could just comment on, well, one question said, would you please comment on the use of clonidine? I think I'm mispronouncing that to promote sleep for children who have autism, and then also just natural alternative treatments for elderly people who have don't sleep properly.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So clonidine, right? So this is it's kind of lowers arousal. It's pretty safe. If you have an autistic child and they're having a hard time sleeping and you had to give them a medication that helped, clonidine is a pretty good one to give. Um, I do know I mean, not me, but probably, like Liz Mumper and the other MAPS professionals, they may have a lot to say about other behavioral interventions for kids with autism that spill over to sleep. I know they talk a lot about dietary changes, anti-inflammatory diets, gluten removal, um, and so it's a bit outside of my scope, but there may be other non-drug approaches for behavioral issues with autism, including sleep, but clonidine is good. For the elderly, I mean, this is challenging, because to be honest, there really isn't like a free lunch, when it comes, unless someone is there, they're towards the end. a lot of these interventions, whether it's an antipsychotic or a benzo, that it'll come around to sort of bite you on the butt later on and make things more complicated. I think trazodone is probably reasonably safe, but the elderly is harder because all of a sudden you worry about them being groggy in the middle of the night and falling over and breaking their hip, or getting up in the morning and toppling over. It's it's pretty challenging. So I think trazodone. Yeah, I would go with the trazodone, and then to the extent I mean, I know this is hard, but to the extent that you can, if it's possible to get them outside, get them in the sunlight, get them moving around, have a look at the medication regimen, kind of get rid of anything that they don't need there. Um, that can all help, but clearly that's very challenging with an older, sick person who's medically complicated.
Well, I'm going to move on to our closing announcements, but before I do so, Dr. Witt-Doerring or Dr. Varon, is there any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I think that, Josef was extremely amazing today. He explained to us very well the good, the bad, and the ugly of benzodiazepines. That's important. Second, he also to have a little more common sense and recognize what's making us not sleep and avoid it. And more importantly, a lot of us are using these hacking either devices or medications or whatever to fall asleep, when we should be doing simple things like walking and losing weight. So I want to thank you, Josef, for an amazing discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. My closing thoughts are just listen to your symptoms. Whenever you guys have that feeling of like, I'm going to buy this thing on Amazon or this supplement or this thing to kind of mask it, your body is very wise. And so just lean into that and just be curious about where they're coming from. It will serve you so well.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Witt-Doerring, for joining us, and Dr. Varon for hosting tonight. I'm going to move over to our closing announcements.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Bye. All right. So next week on IMA's weekly show, Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring, IMA's President and Chief Medical Officer, will be joined by Dr. Ryan Cole, IMA Head of Medical and Scientific Affairs, to revisit conversations from the Asia Pacific Symposium on Critical Care and Emergency Medicine in Indonesia. Together, they'll watch 4 short interviews with physicians from around the world and discuss why their work matters and what these global perspectives can teach us about delivering smarter, safer, and more patient-centered care. That's Wednesday, August 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. IMA's $250,000 match campaign for IMA Academy is still underway. IMA Academy is expanding access to independent medical education, including 12 CME credits from our recent conference. That includes a lecture from tonight's guest, Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring, on Introduction to Weaning Psychotropic Agents. And later this year, IMA Academy plans to launch a 12-part series on cancer. Thanks to the generosity of Nick and Dee Adams, every donation is being matched dollar for dollar. You can support the campaign at imahealth.org/support-IMA-Academy. Before we go, we want to leave you with an important update for physicians and patients. IMA Senior Fellow Dr. Brian Tyson breaks down a recent federal court ruling involving physicians' ability to express medical opinions that differ from government public health positions, and the importance of not censoring doctors for expressing their professional medical judgment. Here's Dr. Tyson with a big win for physicians and informed consent. Thank you all so much for being here tonight, and let's take a look.
Hi, this is Dr. Brian Tyson coming to you from the IMA as a senior fellow to go over one of the breakthrough cases we just had with against the state of California regarding physicians, informed consent, and the First Amendment. So back in 2022, the state of California with the Public Health Department and the California Medical Board decided to pass AB 2098, which was the Misinformation, Disinformation of COVID Act. That would essentially punish physicians like myself who practice here in the state of California for speaking out against the standard that the government has put together. And whatever that standard would be, we would have to follow those guidelines. And if we didn't follow those guidelines, then we would be subject to disciplinary actions under unprofessional conduct. Why that's important is because no other speech can be regulated except for professional speech, in their opinion, because what we say has a greater effect on the population. It doesn't matter that we were correct in what we said or wrong in what we said, but if it went against the public health narrative, then we would be subject to unprofessional conduct. So we sued the state of California, myself, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Wong, and the Children's Health Defense Network. And we filed a motion to have that suspended. In the meantime, there was another lawsuit that also took place that actually got them to rescind the bill, but at the same time, the resolution of the conflict had not been resolved. In certain states, doctors could speak out. In other states, doctors couldn't speak out. If a doctor went against the guidelines, for example, saying that masks didn't work, they would lose their license in, say, Oregon or Washington. But if they said that in Florida, they were not subject to the same punishment. So that created a disconnect or a resolution that had to be resolved in the court system, both on a federal and state level. So our lawsuit basically went after that pretense. And so it took about 4 years. And in just recently, we got the injunction that the state of California could not come after me, Dr. Pierre Corey, or Dr. Wong for anything that we said or spoke out against COVID-19. That's important because eventually we would hope that this would translate to all physicians in California. And then the Supreme Court can then now take up the case to say, yes, this should be done on a national level or not. We wouldn't have been granted the injunction if we did not have enough information or enough merit to the case for it to be successful at the Supreme Court level. Therefore, the judge did grant us the injunction, and it's a big win for physicians and informed consent.